It actually kind of ties into Saudi Arabia. So when I graduated from university, my dad gave me a Rolex that he got as a service award from the oil company that he worked for, and he actually got it the year I was born. And so he gave it to me when I graduated, so it just sat brand new in a box. So it's a Air King reference 5500.
Welcome, Darren Tiffany. Thanks for joining me. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me, Dean. It's nice to finally connect. You know, we've been chatting on Instagram for a while now. So
yeah, it has been a while. Since I've been following you for a while and seeing you doing some amazing work. You've released one watch already. You're working on a second prototype, and you made your own rose engine machine.
Yeah, it's right over here.
Guilloche dials. Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. So you're in Phoenix, Arizona?
Correct. Yep.
And did you grow up? Did you grow up there?
No. So I was actually born and raised in Saudi Arabia. So I lived there until I was 12, and then we moved to Arizona, and it was like high school out here and stuff. And then I moved to California for a couple of years. That's actually where I got into watchmaking. That's where I started, and I just didn't have enough space. So one of the reasons I left California to come back to Arizona was just to get more space so I could get a ridiculous amount of machinery. You know how it goes.
yeah, that's awesome. Oh, wow. So you're in Saudi Arabia till you're 12. And your parents were working over there?
Yeah, my dad worked for an oil company.
Okay. Ah, very cool. That's very interesting. So do you speak any Arabic, or did you lose most of it?
A little bit. So we lived on a compound that was owned by the oil company, and so our school was like on the compound, and it was just for kids of employees of the oil company. So we actually had, most of our teachers were from like the UK and stuff, and everything was in English. So
yeah, that's very cool.
Yeah.
And so how did it start? Like, where did you fall in love with the mechanical side of things?
So it actually kind of ties into Saudi Arabia. So when I graduated from university, my dad gave me a Rolex that he got as a service award from the oil company that he worked for, and he actually got it the year I was born. And so he gave it to me when I graduated, so it just sat brand new in a box. So it's a Air King reference 5500. And so that really kind of kicked it off, my like love for, it started with vintage watches, and I picked up like a Universal Geneve pole router. And then what kind of got me into like making watches started with, I guess you could call it modding. So I found a dial on eBay that was Tiffany & Co. Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. So it had like an outline of Saudi Arabia, and it said Tiffany & Co. Kingdom of Saudi Arabia on it. I was like, wow, that's super cool. Like that, like it's just so fitting for me, but it was just a dial and a movement. And I was like, what the hell am I going to do with this? So kind of just, some off the shelf parts. Like I got a generic case from Auto Fry and some hands, and had a 2824 and just slapped it together. I was like, that's not so bad. And, it's not that hard. That kind of put me down the rabbit hole of, well, I got that off the shelf, but what if I wanted to make my own? And so I bought a milling machine to make my own case.
Okay. And how did that go with that milling machine?
I mean, it worked. It was a good machine to start with. I had no experience in machining or watchmaking, so I just kind of thought I would figure it out. So I just watched a bunch of YouTube videos, and the little milling machine was just like a little benchtop manual mill, and so I did everything on the milling machine, all round parts like the bezel and like case and everything, just with fixturing with like rotary tables and boring heads and stuff like that. But it turned out pretty good, for the very first watch I ever made. I'm proud of it.
Yeah, that's very cool. So is that the Mark 1 case that you made?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, with the blue dial.
Yep. And so the Mark 2 case is very similar in its design, or is it? Yeah,
conceptually, like the kind of 70s era sports style case, Royal Oak, Nautilus kind of case shape. Except I learned a lot, doing Mark 1 and Mark 2. I actually had gotten my lathe already. So that was like when I had moved to Arizona already. And so I was able to do single point threading on the lathe, so I could have a screw down case back. And I used a 2892 and made it like 3 or 4 millimeters thinner. than Mark 1. I think the prototype, it's even thinner than the production ones that I'm making. I think it was like 8.4 millimeters thick, something like that. So super thin.
Oh, that's very good. And all out of 316 stainless.
Yeah.
On a Chinese bench mill.
For Mark II, so there was sort of a transition point as I was working on it. So I probably did most of the milling work on that little benchtop milling machine. I had my lathe already at that point, and it was actually as I was building the Rose engine, and I needed to bore holes through the rosette carriage, like the spindle carriage, to put 1 1/4 inch bushings through a 1 inch piece of 4140 steel. And I had my little boring head on that little benchtop mill, and it was giving it everything it had, but it was just not happy about it. And so I just pulled the trigger and I bought this bigger knee milling machine here.
Yep.
So that was like the transition point. So as I was finishing up the Rose engine, I picked that up, and it also made my life a lot easier in milling the stainless for the cases and stuff.
Yeah. Okay. So now it's all milled on that one, and then you work on. Yeah. Very cool.
Yep. Yeah. So I have the milling machine, the surface grinder that I use for putting like the graining on the cases, the lathe, the Rose engine, the pantograph here, and then the bandsaw and blasting cabinet and stuff like that.
Okay. So, and is that mainly all the machinery that you have that's behind you? Do you have any other?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, on my desk or my bench here, I have a kiln for doing enamel. Okay. And then I have a little CNC router that I use to make the boxes. And I also use it to make some pantograph templates occasionally.
Yep. Oh, very cool. And how did you discover the guilloché, the dolls?
So I actually was just experimenting. I had no idea what guilloché was when I was working on Mark 1. And I was just working with my rotary table and my boring head and just seeing like, I have these concentric fixtures and cutters. How can I like orient them to get really cool patterns that you wouldn't get on like just a milling machine or just like a flat grain dial, something like that. And so it was just kind of by experimentation. And then I came across like more examples of it, like with Breguet and stuff. And I was like, wow, that's really interesting. I didn't know I was like on that path already. And so I just started reading books, and Watchmaking by George Daniels has a chapter on operating the Rose engine and guilloché. And then there's a couple other books specific to guilloché. And so I just did a bunch of research and kind of put the puzzle pieces together and figured it out. So I had only seen a Rose engine one time before building my own, and I didn't know what it was at the time. It's only like looking back like, oh, that's what that was. And so I built it just from looking at reference pictures and asking questions and stuff like that.
Oh, wow. Really? Okay.
Yeah.
So you had no like other technical information. It was mainly just pictures and stuff that you were going from.
Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome. Cause on your Instagram looks pretty good, man. Like,
thanks, man.
How it is and how the dolls come out really good.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah. I mean, every time I operate the Rose engine, I get better. It's the hardest part is learning how to operate the machine and like shape your cutters and stuff like that. Building the machine was relatively easy compared to operating it.
Okay. Wow. Cause there's a mob in the US that build like modern style Rose engine.
Yeah. David Lindau.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. Yep. He makes brand new ones and they're gorgeous machines, but I couldn't afford one at the time, so I had to make my own.
Yeah. And so on the Mark 1, it's the one with that purple dial with the round indices. Is that the
that's Mark 2. That's the prototype for my Series 1 production watches.
Okay. Yep. I understand. So that was the first one of your Mark 2. Mm-hmm. So how did you get that purpling on the first of all, what material is that? Is that silver?
The dial?
Yeah, the dial
is German silver, nickel silver.
German silver. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And how did you purple? Is that enameled the color on?
No. So it's actually going back to my background in like automotive refinishing. So when I was in high school, a senior in high school, I apprenticed at a hot rod shop where we did like custom paint and body and working with like composites and stuff like that. And so what that is actually a a candy paint. So like you would see on like a lowrider, like over Silver Flake. Yeah. So it's like a translucent candy paint, and then it has a clear lacquer on top of it.
Yep. That's very good. And how do you apply that, with the airbrush or just a
Yeah, so I use a detail spray gun, like a really small spray gun.
Yeah, it looks nice.
Thanks, man.
Nice, the finishing on that. And I can see, like, from your Instagram as well, you have some flame. You're testing with some flame enameling.
Yeah, so before I got the kiln, I was just using a torch to enamel, and it can work, but it's like really difficult to get the right temperature. So when I got the kiln, it made it a whole lot easier in getting like, clear enamel and really like well applied enamel. But I also use the kiln to do tempering on like indices and stuff. So it helps get like a really even heat for like bluing indices and hands to get them all the same color.
Yep. Okay. And so the indices that are on your watches, they're all steel and they're blued. Is that how?
Yeah. So I use 1095 carbon steel, and I think it has a different name in every other part of the country, but it's it's like a spring steel, but it comes in sheets, and it comes annealed, so it's really easy to work with. So I machine them on my pantograph. So the hands and indices are from 1095, and then I harden them, finish them, or clean them up, black polish them on a tin lapping plate, and then color them.
Yeah, they come out really nice. They come out really good. That
Thanks.
blue really stands out when it's the plain silver dial. It comes out really well. And so, have you done much experimenting with enameling over your guilloché work?
I have. So I was doing some like pendant necklaces and some earrings and stuff, really just to practice my guilloché before doing more watch styles. It's something I kind of fell away from it as I was like getting into production of the watches, but it's definitely something I want to revisit. Making an enamel dial is super difficult because the enamel builds like mil thickness so fast, and if your dial gets too thick, then you have to like make the fitting pipes on your hands longer or extend the posts and stuff. And so it's just coming down to figuring out how to polish it. And I've been doing some experimenting with trying to flatten and polish the enamel. But I would love to do a series that has some enamel guilloché silver dials, but I think that might be maybe like a year or two in the future before I can actually get like some production pieces out with it,
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's good. And are you going for like that translucent enamel? Yeah. So to still be able to see the guilloché underneath. Yeah. That looks really nice. That looks super good. And you use the surface grinder for the graining on the case.
Yeah. So I picked up the surface grinder to build machines, and like to make my own parallels, and I use it to make fixtures and other stuff that just needs to be really flat or really parallel. But I wanted to experiment. It's grinding 316 stainless is like really difficult. It's really gummy, so it like gums up your abrasive wheels. So you have to use like certain abrasives with it, and you have to keep it cool. So I run like a cool mist sprayer on it to keep it cool with cutting fluid and coolant. But I really like how it turns out. It's like super uniform, but it also has the benefit of making the cases really, really flat too.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's very cool. Yeah, and I guess the big one is the prototype, the P4 that you have on Instagram. Wow, that's looking real hot.
Thanks, man. Yeah.
And it's really good. I love how you have the pictures and you put the steps down of like of making the case and stuff, and really taking advantage of that pantograph. And I didn't know, man, you could go 316 stainless on the pantograph.
Yeah, I mean, it's not fast, and it likes to kick around as you're hanging on to the stylus. You got to hang on with your life, but it'll cut it. It's I got the cutter running at like 7,000 RPM, something like that, with an 1/8 inch cutter, and it goes through. I keep it cool, so I run the cool mist setup on it. Got to keep it cool and just take your time. I'm only taking off like 10 thousandths of an inch, which is what, like 0.05 millimeters, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's another weird thing that I do that nobody else does. I machine everything in inches, just because all my machines are set up. Before I had digital readouts on my lathe on my mill, I was doing everything with just the hand dials.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's how I learned how to machine is everything in inches. Even my pantograph, even though it's from like the 50s and it's an English machine, everything is in inches. All the dials and everything are in inches. And so, it's just, so I have to do some converting as I'm like making movement rings to fit like movements. So I'm like converting from metric to inches.
All the movements are in millimeters.
Yeah, so. Exactly.
Very good. Just use that online calculator.
Exactly, man. It's a lifesaver.
And what brand is that? An Alexander? Pantograph? Yeah, very cool.
Yeah, it's an Alexander Model 3A. So it's a 1-to-1 copy of the Deckel GK21. But during the war, World War II, obviously Deckel wasn't exporting machines from Germany. And so Alexander, I think they started as like an import company, importing Deckels to the UK and sending them to the US and stuff like that. They actually went to a foundry and started making their own parts. But the downside is it doesn't use Deckel collets. It uses proprietary Alexander collets. Oh, no. And they're so hard to find. So I'm limited to the cutters that I can run in it.
Okay. And that's why you stick. So you have the 1/8 inch collet?
Yeah. So that's what it came with, an 1/8 inch collet. And then I found 2 collets that look like they came off the Titanic or something. they've seen better days, but they're metric. And so they're really close to some other fractional inch sizes. So my plan is to build a tool post grinder for the lathe and grind them out to like 3/8 of an inch and 1/4 inch so I can run more tools.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's very cool. It's it's a big machine. It's very sturdy. I think the mistake I made when I bought my pantograph is that I couldn't really see it because it was on eBay and we don't get much stuff in Australia. But it was a bit too light. I think it was, and all the tables. Is yours tables like so where you put your jig and where you have your work? So your tables are both parallel, straight?
With each other, they're independent, so they're both on z-axis.
Yeah, if you run like a DTI, I don't know if you've done it. Say from your stylus, you run a DTI over your the table. Is it quite straight from corner to corner? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. See, the one I had.
Yours wasn't?
No. Oh. And they're both like different. Like one was tilted one way, the other was tilted the other, and I tried like shimming it and stuff. I just couldn't get it to work, and then ended up snapping one of the bolts that hold to the table because I was shimming under there. Yeah, that was the only point that I could. So I think it's quite important to have. Yeah,
especially when you're operating in 2D. I mean, that machine that you had was 3D, wasn't it? To some extent. Yeah. So was mine, but mine has like a 1-inch bolt that like locks the arms in place. So if you're running 2D, it's like super rigid. Yeah. And then it has like a setting lever or like a setting bar. So you can set like parallelism between your tables for machining 3D. It's a really well thought out machine. I mean, it's a German machine, copied by the English. So the electronics were garbage. So I had to change the motor out, but everything else works fine. Yeah.
Oh, good. That's good. And so, the P4, is it coming out soon? Is it something we're gonna?
So that one is just a prototype. So as I'm like ramping up and getting into, just launched my website and I'm taking orders for the Series 1 watches, and there's 12 watches left to order or that are available. Before I got into like full swing of just making the same watch, 12 more times, I wanted to kind of get out of my element a little bit with that design. And so it was like the first time I did a lot of things. First like round watch that I did in stainless. So I did my bronze prototype here is kind of how it started. So I did the first round watch in stainless, the first time I've done a exhibition case back. The first time I've done gold toned, black polished indices. And the first time I've done a frosted silver guilloché dial. So I just want to like get out of my element a little bit and do something a little bit different, kind of like push myself, and I learned a lot of stuff along the way that I can apply to like further production of the Series 1. So that's just a one-off. It's the first time I did a manual wind too, just an undecorated 2801. And I mean, at the end of the day, the stuff that I'm working on is like less about the movement that's in it and more about, like the making of the case and the dial. Not to say I don't care about the movement. I do. That's why I love watches and mechanical watches, but it's just not a part that I'm making. So, my customers understand that, it's about like the artistic representation of the dial and the case and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. That's, and so I guess with the sales, so you've sold 3 already of the,
yeah, so I've sold 3 of the first 3 in the Series 1 production of 15 total units. And then I sold the P004 prototype already.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so that one's moved on.
Oh, wow. Very good. Because when was that post on Instagram? Like a week or so ago?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was actually the person who bought number 2 in the Series 1 production. Okay. He reached out and he bought that one as well. So
yeah, very good, man.
Yeah,
that's awesome. So yeah, return customer, they're happy with the product. Yeah, it's very good. That's good to know. Yeah.
So how about you? How did you get into making movements and the micromechanics aspect of watchmaking?
Yeah, just it was just I was always into cars, like growing up in school and stuff, and always wanted to make stuff with my hands. We grew up. My dad, he had a business. We used to make wooden educational toys and puzzles, and like around the 2000, we bought a CNC router to start cutting out the pieces because they're all done by jigsaw, like. The way we
hand finishing them,
produced it, and it was all hand sprayed pieces and stuff. And we used to we used to cut like 3 stacks of like 6mm MDF timbers at once, and then number them because they're part of the same series, and then spray them, then put them back and stuff on the jigsaw, and then we ended up getting a CNC router, and I like made things so much easier, and then repeatable parts and stuff. And then I was always big into cars, and then I think like 8 or so years ago, it might sound stupid, but I saw like there was a video with Philippe Dufour and Vianney Houter. There's that timepiece thing, and then it clicked. I'm like, how did the watches, like back in the day, there was no batteries, like I like, are these watches with no batteries, like it's all metal? And then I just started researching into it. And it got me. Like I was always into mechanics and machines. Like I always really loved working with the machines, especially like we had wood lathes and stuff. And then I was like, oh wow, this is so cool. And then I just fell down that rabbit hole, and it just got so deep. I can't see the light anymore. But that's how I got started for me to start down this path. So but hopefully one day end up where you have like, you have that vision, and then you actually like have the finished product, man. Like how did that feel like once it was all done?
Dude, it's like the best feeling in the world when you are holding something in your hand or like wearing something on your wrist that you made from scratch. It's like, it's mind blowing, especially when you're starting from nothing, like no apprenticeship, no schooling, nothing. You figure it out until you have something that works, and then you get better every time you do it. It's like the best feeling, because there's a lot of frustrating days in the shop. I'm sure you know that feeling where you spend like 8 hours, 10 hours in the shop, and you get a part that just doesn't work. You missed a measurement, or you broke a drill in your workpiece, and you're just like, oh my God. And it's like frustrating. And then you finally get something that is complete, and it's like, it's the best feeling,
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, like, back in the day, especially when I was first starting out and stuff, and there was like that big thing, somebody made them watch, and they're like, oh, it's just a case, like a case stuffer or something. So somebody, like, they just bought the case and put the movement in. But I think even like if you were to launch a product and even do that and have everything outsourced, like just the headaches doing that, I think it's without going down that path, you don't know. And I think like now I'm like, it's pretty respectable just to even bring a product to actual like have it for sale. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's a whole different ball game, just going through trying. Getting right to that end, that finish line of
Mm-hmm.
that process is a real achievement, and that's why it's huge congratulations, man,
Thanks,
on
man.
getting there. So
I appreciate it. It means a lot.
yeah, no worries. With that, I was just gonna ask, so are you producing I remember there was a podcast you were talking about how you're producing the cases in like a small batch production.
Mm-hmm.
So with your series 1, have you got like a lot of the casework completed and you're just waiting for final finishing, or?
Yeah, so I took all of the cases to the same stage where basically the lug contours are shaped and they're bored and threaded. So the way that it's assembled is like sort of like a sandwich assembly. So the bezel actually screws onto the case from the top and then the case back from the back.
Yeah.
And then so the movement ring and stuff are held in the middle. So I have all the cases threaded and mostly shaped, and like the lug openings for where the strap attaches, those are all milled out. And so it just comes down to grinding them and then cutting the taper. So I have a jig that I made for the milling machine where I can just cut the tapers of the lugs. And it's a lot of hand finishing too. So I actually made some file guides out of A2 tool steel. So they thread onto the case. And I actually file the case round and then hand finish it with like sanding sticks. So I made my own sanding blocks too on the surface grinder. So precision ground sanding blocks and hardened steel. Why not? You got the tools. Why not? So yeah. So there's still a fair amount of work that goes into each case, but a lot of stuff is spec'd out by the customer. So the type of finishing on the dial, the guilloché pattern, the coloring on the hands and indices, and the finishing on the hands and indices and stuff like that. So a fair amount of work has to wait until I actually get the order to complete the watch.
And you make your on your strap, you make the clasp, the
buckle. Yep.
The buckle. Sorry.
Yeah. So I make the buckle and the pin. Because I'm too dumb to just buy $5 ones online. So I spend 8 hours making a buckle and a pin for a watch, but it's the little things,
Yeah, I think that's really good. Because I do want to make my own case as well. And the buckle is like, I feel like the buckle is going to be harder than the case itself.
It's a pain in the ass, man, especially when you're working with like a billet of stainless. Like when you cut the channel out of the middle and you get the ends thin, like it moves around, it warps. So I've been experimenting with stress relieving it in the kiln. So you like leave it in the kiln for like 3 hours at a certain temperature and hoping that it relieves the stress and like the tension in the billet before you start machining it. I've scrapped a lot of buckles trying to make these buckles, but it's a labor of love.
Yeah, because I imagine, because it's like the case as like big and complex it is, I think it's more like conventional, like turning, milling, or the buckle just seems a bit small, and the shapes aren't like conventional. You've got the down part and the recess on the back and stuff. It just feels like it's going to be a bit of a nightmare trying to such a small item. But that's really good that you go down that path and make that too. That's awesome, man. That's awesome. And I seen that tattoo on your arm on your Instagram. The movement. So is that the Vorcha movement?
Yeah, the Guilloche 5401 micro rotor.
Yeah, very cool. And is there any reason why you chose that movement and that brand? Or
I mean, I really like what Guilloche like represents, especially to independent watchmakers in terms of the level of finishing on their movements and like the level of complication in their movements, and how they keep low minimum order quantities. For most of their stuff, it's like 15 to 25 pieces is the minimum order quantity. And when you're making 25, 50 watches a year, it just fits perfectly. And they're like super nice people too. Like, I got to meet with one of their reps in Vegas last year. and go over like the catalog. And, they invited me to tour their facility. Obviously I was going to go this year, but that's not happening because of COVID.
Yeah.
But they're just really nice, really down to earth people. And, the connection to Parmigiani and just everything that Parmigiani does is incredible. So I just connected with them, and they have, on like their online catalog, they have exploded views of all their movements and stuff. So I just saw it. I was like, that would make an incredible tattoo. So
yeah, it looks pretty cool, man.
Thanks, man. I can use it to like cheat on a test or something.
Yeah. Do you have anything in the line you're thinking about doing some schooling or education for watchmaking?
I don't think so. I'm really content with, learning as I'm going. And just at this point in my life, I don't feel like it would make a whole lot of sense. I mean, I would love to get into micromechanics and stuff, and like some of the incredible stuff that you're working on, and just like learning how to make main plates and bridges and stuff like that, and decoration, like to do engine turned movement, like a guilloché movement would be like incredible to do. But, I'm just not at that level of like manufacturing those parts yet. So that's definitely something in the future. I mean, there's like the distance learning, like online education. Obviously it's not the same hands-on that you get in some schools, but I would definitely love to learn more. But I think I would rather partner with somebody who is, like all in movement making and movement design, engineering and stuff like that, and kind of like bring our minds together and learn from each other and produce some incredible stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. And so just speaking on Guilloche, can we see maybe in the future a movement with the watches with some Guilloche?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, for sure. I was planning on doing it in Series 1, but because my business is entirely self-funded and I don't have any debt in the business, to meet the minimum order quantity would have been really stretching myself. And so I chose to go with the ETA 2892 just because it's tried and true. It's easy to get parts for. It's easily modified. Like I don't have dates. I don't run like calendar wheels on my movements. And so ETA has a part to delete the middle crown position. So it's like a 2-position setting lever. And so the parts are available. I can order one at a time from like a US supplier. And it's just a whole lot easier in terms of like just getting started. But, the goal of the business is like when these Series 1 orders are coming in is to build up equity and meet the minimum order quantity. I haven't really decided which movement and which complications I'm going to go with yet. And I'd really like to go, visit their facility before I place an order, maybe like place the order there. But yeah, it's definitely in the future. I mean, the plan right now is for Series 2. So the prototype that I did, P04, was kind of building towards what Series 2 will be in terms of like a round watch, something a little bit more traditional. But hopefully with a micro rotor in it, or who knows, what I'll end up with. Yeah.
Yeah. On the movement, it looks amazing. I think like if I had a Guilloche movement, yeah, it'd be really very, very nice, very desirable. And what was the diameter of your P04?
That one is 39 millimeters in diameter, and 20 millimeter lug openings.
Okay. Yeah. That's really nice, man. That's awesome. And so
what about you? Have you began prototyping, working on cases? I mean, you got that new lathe. I could see it hiding in the corner there. You finally got a full-size machine in the shop.
Yeah, finally got a full size. So we moved just recently, like 2.5 months ago, to the new place. So I got it set up again. Hopefully, once I think I finished prototyping the movement. So right now I'm going into do the main plate and the bridges as well, because I just want more of that design control over it. And as much as I like the way I designed the bridges originally, I don't want to go for that. I want to go for a different style, like single bridge per wheel. But then if on the standard main plate, you can see all these holes through the bottom, and then it's got its plating on there, which is quite hard to remove. So yeah, once I get all that finished, I'm definitely going to concentrate on machining on the big lathe and just go back. So I haven't used the big lathe in so long, so I want to hone my skills a little bit before, maybe spend a couple of weeks just doing some projects, making sure I have everything right, and then going real hard. I'm not sure how I'm going to do it. You have a very interesting ways of having like the 3-piece case, because I was thinking of doing like a 2-piece case, having kind of like 2-piece, but have the round pieces and then the actual lugs like silver soldered on. So I think,
that's like the old school way of doing it. I think Daniels talks about it in his book. Doing it that way.
And years ago, like maybe 5 years ago, I saw like Hajime Asaoka do it as well on his tourbillon, and the way he did it. So I was thinking that, I mean, you've shown like another method of how to do it using the lathe and the pantograph, which is very cool. I guess it's just like, we'll see how things go, a bit of experimentation. So just, I was actually, what you said before on your series 1, so the bezel screws down and then the case back screws as well. So you have 2 threads going through that piece?
So it's a single thread. So the entire case body is threaded all the way through.
Okay. Okay. And it just uses the same thread. Oh, yeah, makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the top of the case is turned, so it has an O-ring gasket seat. So the bezel is gasketed, the crystal is gasketed, and then the case back also has an O-ring seat on the back of the case.
Okay. That's awesome. Yeah, that's really good. And have you pressure tested it, or just?
No, I haven't. I actually ordered just like a Chinese knockoff pressure tester off of eBay. Yeah, like the hand lever one. Yeah, so I just ordered that today. I mean, it only goes to what, like 5
or 6 PSI?
6 bar. Yeah, something like that. So I mean, 60 meters is, I don't know, it's better than not testing it at all. So
for sure.
I mean, I built it with the idea of it being fairly water resistant. I mean, they're not dive watches, so I'm not going to recommend somebody like goes and dives in the Pacific Ocean with it. But you know, you can like jump in the pool or in the hot tub or like wash your hands. You know, just enough to not have to worry about.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, because I think once I bought like this $10, it was a $10 watch, like Australian dollars, so it's probably like $4 American, right? It was like a skeletonized watch, like it was so cheap, like from China. This was I think like 4, 5, maybe 6 years ago. And like, I remember I was boiling the water and the steam just went all up and down, the whole thing up. Yeah, so
what you pay for sometimes, right?
Yeah, that's it. But that's really good, man. That's And then I mean, I'm sure you saw in the pictures I did of the, you know, in the making of the P04 was the bezel is actually integrated into the case on that watch. So it's just the case back, and then the crystal is gasketed on the top. It makes it a whole lot easier. I mean, it takes out a whole lot of steps in terms of making more parts. Yeah. So that's the 2-piece case that you made. Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, that's something that I want to try and do, like maybe that way. Yeah. In your, what do you think? Which method do you prefer, or which style do you prefer? The 3-piece or the 2?
So with my Series 1, it kind of has to be 3 pieces because of the case shape. So majority of the work on that case is done on the milling machine, and to do an integrated bezel, it just wouldn't turn out as great as I would like it to. Yeah. And so it kind of has to be 3 pieces. I mean, if you look at, you know, the Royal Oak, it's 3-piece. The bezel is held on by the clamping screws. And same thing with like the Nautilus. The bezel is a separate piece from the case body. It's just, if you're making a round watch, an integrated bezel is a piece of cake. It's the way to go. I mean, you're removing a factor of like water intrusion by having the integrated bezel. And ultimately it's stronger. It reinforces the case body itself.
Yeah. And especially if there's no, I guess, like, like a spinning bezel, Like there's probably no point at all, like to just have it integrated.
Exactly.
I do like the integrated section. I've seen how Rogers does like the 3-piece, but then he silver solds it all together.
Yeah.
It comes out real nice.
Yeah. If you're working in precious metal, it makes sense to do like the componentry of the case. So it's more additive manufacturing than subtractive, right? Because if you're turning gold, like a solid billet of gold, like 18 karat gold to make a case, it's like, holy shit, how do you recover all of that, you know?
Yeah.
So the way that he's doing it when he's working with precious metals, that's the way to do it. I mean, that's a traditional way to do it. It makes a lot of sense to do it that way.
Yeah. Yeah, man. I guess like, so how was that transition? Sorry, just going back to, I find it really fascinating how you grew up in Saudi Arabia. Like, how was that transition when you came like to the States?
It was unique. You know, we would come to the States every year. So because my family wasn't, we're not Saudi citizens, it's impossible. Even though I was born there, it's impossible to get citizenship for me. So we would have to come to the States every year. So we would actually have to leave the country. We were required by Saudi law to leave the country for 3 months every year. And so the company my dad worked for would subsidize that. So they would pay round trip airfare for the employee and their family to go back home for 3 months and come back. So we would take advantage of that. We would take a trip to somewhere in the world that we hadn't been. So I'm super fortunate to like grow up traveling the world and experiencing a bunch of different cultures. But then we would come back to the States to visit family and stuff. So I'd been back to the US like every year, but coming here. So when I moved to the States, it was like 2 months before September 11th. And like the terrorist attack on the Twin Towers. And so it was kind of a strange vibe, you know, when like even my teachers would know that I was from Saudi Arabia and they would like ask me weird questions about it. And it's just like, it was weird, you know, and it was very culturally diverse where I grew up in Saudi Arabia. So there's people from all over the world living on one compound, and it was like really tight knit. And then coming to the US where it wasn't so much that way. And, you know, there's definitely some culture shock, but definitely wouldn't trade my experiences for anything, you know. Loved where I grew up. I love where I live now. Yeah. Just love life, you know.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, man. And so, sorry, you went to California, is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, so I moved to California in 2016.
Okay.
And then I moved back in like January of 2019. Yeah, I just moved out there for work. So there was a job opportunity and I jumped on it. California is a great place to visit. Not a very good place to live. I'm definitely never moving back there, but I'll happily go visit every once in a while.
I've seen, a lot of people, what it seems like a lot of internet people are kind of moving away from there.
Yeah.
That I've seen. Yeah. But which is a shame. But so you like Phoenix? Yeah. You like?
Yeah, I love it. You know, it's still a big city. Phoenix is like Phoenix metro area is like 1.5 million people. And it's a big city, but it's really spread out. You know, it's not like high rises and people living on top of each other. You got your own space and people are really laid back. Just a great place to live. I like it here.
It's very good. Yeah, that sounds awesome. I've heard some stories about U of A though, like the university there.
Oh, in Tucson? Yeah. I went to Arizona State, so they're like our rivals. I never followed like the sports or anything. So, yeah, they're both like notorious party schools.
Yeah, that's what I heard.
I mean, especially in Tucson, there's like nothing to do in Tucson, so it makes sense for them.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's funny that you mentioned that you had a friend that moved from Tucson to Sydney, because I actually have a friend who moved from Sydney here. He like lives a couple miles away from me. So he was like visiting some friends out here and he met a girl and they got married and he moved out here December or something like that of last year. And he hit me up. So it was kind of crazy. So he was living in Sydney and he had talked to like Nicholas Hacko and like Josh Hacko.
Yes.
And they recommended that he like link up with Josh Shapiro because he was flying into LA and they were spending like a couple days in LA. So he met up with Joshua Shapiro, and they were like talking. And he was like looking at the Rose engine and stuff, and he found out he was moving to Phoenix. And so he's like, Josh told him, he's like, hey, there's a guy who built his own Rose engine. He's doing guilloché out in Phoenix. And so he hit me up, and it turns out that they live like a mile and a half or something like that away from me. So like crazy small world of like meeting people through watches, you know?
Yeah. Especially, I think it's quite, I think everyone knows everyone, like whoever's making, like, especially on Instagram and stuff, it's so good. Like you can see everybody is doing some amazing stuff. Like I think in the next couple of years, like it's going to be really, I really hope like it makes a big impact on like the main market of like collectors and stuff, because some of the stuff that's coming out is really awesome. Like from Germany, you got the Stefan Kudoku. I forget how to pronounce his name. Hopefully he's from Germany. Yeah. I think he is. Like his watch looks really good, and then so many independents. And I saw like even on your Instagram, like Dan Spitz is like commenting, like he's doing amazing stuff as well. It's really.
I mean, it's a crazy time, right? Especially with I think Instagram is like a catalyst for a lot of it, where there's a lot of watchmakers coming out of the woodwork outside of Switzerland. Yeah. And I think hopefully there's a lot of pressure being put on the Swiss companies and like the conglomerates, you know, people are getting wise to like the marketing bullshit that a lot of companies try to cram down people's throats of like buying defunct companies and trying to take their heritage as your own and Swiss made like on the dial. Like, what does that even mean anymore? So I think collectors are wise to the marketing gimmicks and a lot of independents popping up all over the world. And I think it's a unique opportunity to be part of it, you know?
Yeah, for sure. That's really good. Well, Darren, thank you so much for accepting, you know, my call and stuff, and hopefully we can catch up again soon and go over all the awesome stuff that you're doing.
Yeah, man. I appreciate it, Dean. I really do. You know, I've been following your channel for a while and just seeing all the cool stuff that you're doing. And then you kind of took your hiatus as you were moving, but it's really awesome to see you coming back, and I can't wait to see some more content from you.
Thanks, man. Thanks,
I mean, because the stuff that we're working on, you know, when you look at a lot of large watch companies or even just watch companies in general, like the two things that most companies outsource are their movements and their cases. You know, like nearly everybody is buying those two things. So, you know, little guys like you and I who are just making these things in our shops, I think it brings in some cool attention, you know? Yeah,
no, that is very cool. And if people want to check out your watch, where can they buy your watch from?
Yeah, so I just launched my website. It's dmtiffany.com or dmtiffanytimepieces.com, either one. You can check me out on Instagram, dmtiffany.timepieces, and then my YouTube channel is just dmtiffanytimepieces.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Darren. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Dean. Have a good one, man.
You too. Take care.